Welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Wednesday, the 4th day of Tamuz, Dalet Tamuz. Let's begin with tzedakah. The daily tzedakah, shemekareves es hageula, tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. So today we start chapter 10 in Shar, Hayichud, והאמונה, the gateway of faith, of unity in faith. And we finished last chapter explaining that there are certain things that we are not able to understand. We can only grasp it through faith. It's beyond understanding. And we spoke specifically about the concept of God's unity with his sephiras, with his attributes. As you remember, the beginning of this book, Shar, Hayichud, והאמונה, is part of Tanya, talks about the unity of God with the world. That the world doesn't have its true existence. Hashem makes it existing constantly. And then, chapter 8 and 9, the Alter Rebbe spoke about the unity of God with his attributes. That there are not two separate things like by human being. We have the human being, we have our intellect, we have our emotive attributes, but everything what we say by Hashem, although Hashem is way beyond anything of these attributes, yet he is united with them. And that concept, the Alter Rebbe finished off by saying that this is called Rosa de Mehemnusa, the secret of faith, to understand the attributes of Atzilus, how they are united with Hashem as one. That's beyond our understanding. But yet in this chapter 10, the Alter Rebbe says, nevertheless, Hashem, the Torah, gives us a little glimpse of understanding. And for that reason, the Torah gives us the example, the metaphor. The Kabbalists give us the example comparing, describing God's attributes. They refer to it as light. Because there is something about light that gives us a little bit of understanding of this concept, the unity of God with his attributes, with his spheres. And this is because, in general, this is what the Alter Rebbe's approach is, Chabad, Chochma Bina Das, to try to understand everything that is possible. You know, it says in the Torah, talks about Hashem saying to Avraham, God said to Abraham, Tzei achutza usfor kochavim im tuchal lispor otam. Go outside and count the stars. Will you be able to count the stars? Obviously not. That's my ending, but that's what the Torah says. Im tuchal, like a question. God is saying, Im tuchal lispor otam. Will you be able to count the star? In other words, suggesting that he is not going to be able to count the stars. So if that is the case, then why does he tell him, Spor et hakochavim, count the stars? And the message here is that Hashem tells Avram, yes, you cannot count the stars, but you should try. Do everything, all your effort, what you can, to achieve something beyond your understanding. And the rest, leave up to me. And that is what Hashem says to him, Ko yezarecha. That's how your children will be. We are beyond the logic. So that is why another glimpse into the above logic, but the Torah gives us a little bit of understanding in using this metaphor, this analog of the light. Let's inside what the Alter Rebbe says. Chapter 10 in Shar, Hayichud, והאמונה. Not the one. Just a minute. That's the Alter Rebbe. Chapter 10. Ach mikol makom. Nevertheless, despite the fact that the spheres transcends intellect and comprehension, but oil v'dibra Torah kol shen bnei Adam, l'shakech es ha'oizen ma sheyechola l'shmeya. Since the Torah speaks as in the language of man, in order to modulate for the ear, what it is able to hear, to give us a little bit of understanding. The Torah uses the metaphors, the analogies, in order for us to be able to understand something. The permission has been granted to the Kabbalists, Chachma Yemes, meaning literally it means the scholars of truth, to speak allegorically of the spheres, the divine attributes. Now the Kabbalists called the spheres lights, using terminology borrowed from the revelation of light. And why is that? So that by means of this metaphor, the nature of the unity of the Holy One, blessed be He, and His attributes will be somewhat understood by us. What is the analogy? It's going to explain. This is like the light that comes from the sun. So the light that comes from the sun, when you look at the light separately, you see a separate entity. We spoke about it earlier. That when the light, where does it come from? Obviously, it comes from the sun itself. So when you don't see the sun, when you look at the light itself, it looks like a separate entity. But when the light is in the sun itself, in the orb of the sun, which is the luminary, the source of light, there the light does not have its own independent existence. It doesn't have its entity. It is part of the sun, the luminary itself. And that is a metaphor, an analogy to the spheres that come out from Hashem. And when it's within God Himself, the essence of the light of the spheres, then it does not have its own separate entity. It is included within the oneness, the simple unity of Hashem Himself. It is by way of illustration, like the unity of the sunlight that is within the solar globe, with the solar globe itself, which is called not only the sun, but also a luminary, inasmuch as it emits light. As it is written that God created the greater luminary, meaning the very source of light. That means the sun is about emitting light. That's what the sun is about. Now the ray and the beam which spreads forth and shines from it is called light. As it is written, and God called the light day, which means when it's day, the light is revealed. Now when the light is within its source, in the orb of the sun, it is united with it in absolute unity. For there, within the sun, there is only one entity, namely the body of the luminary which emits light. So it would hardly be reasonable to say that within the orb of the sun there exist two things, the luminary and its light. Obviously not. Within the sun globe, only the sun itself exists. כי הזיו או ישום עצם אחד ממש עם גוף המאיר המאיר ואין לו שום מציאות כלל בפני עצמו. For there, the ray and the light is absolutely one being with the body of the luminary which illuminates, and it has no existence by itself at all. So the appearance of the ray and light outside the sun would seem to indicate that the light exists within the sun itself. For if it reaches out and illuminates the whole world, it is surely found within its source. In fact, however, when sunlight is considered at the stage at which it is found within the luminary itself, it is so completely identified with it that it cannot be termed light at all. Within the sun, the light has no existence with an independent entity, or with an independent identity. So the same thing, says the Alter Rebbe, this describes the unity of God and his attributes, that although outside of Hashem's revelation, we feel the attributes, we feel the kindness, we feel the severity and everything, but in the source itself, it is one with Hashem. So that is the analogy of light is a perfect analogy for that aspect of the unity. וכדבורים האלה ממש ויועסם מזהים מדויסף של הקדוש ברוך הוא ורצונו ורחמסו בעולם האצילוס ומאוסו ועצמוסו כביכול. Now precisely in this manner, and even more so, precisely in this manner of unity, the sunlight and the sun, and even more than that. What does it mean even more so? Because obviously, when talking about godliness, it's way beyond anything. It just gives us a little bit of understanding using that analogy. But the analogy, after all, has its limitation. It is something with our physical world. And here we're talking about God's unity, which is even a greater level of unity, which is beyond our understanding. So even more so is the unity of, on one hand, the attributes of the Holy One, blessed be He, and His will and wisdom in the world of Atzilut, the highest spiritual world, with, on the other hand, His essence and being, as it were. Who becomes clothed in them in the spheres of Atzilus and unites with them in perfect unity. Since they derived and emanated from him, just as, by way of analogy, the light is diffused from the sun. But the Alter Rebbe concludes here in this paragraph saying that, you know what, we just said that this is a perfect analogy, but really it's not such a perfect analogy. Because after all, it is beyond our understanding. However, however, God's unity with his attributes is not exactly in this manner, meaning like the fusion of the sun with the light which is still within it, but in a manner which is remote and concealed from our comprehension. For his ways are higher than our ways. So this is the end of today's shir. Do we understand it? No. Did we get a better appreciation of what Hashem is? Absolutely. And that's the idea. The more we study this, Shar, Hiyichud, והאמונה, the more we understand what is Hashem as much as we can understand, it gets easier and easier for us to devote ourselves to Hashem, to realize how much we are nothing. We are completely nullified to Hashem. And the more we nullify ourselves to Hashem, the more united we are with us, just like that sunlight in the sun itself. This is the end of today's Shir. Mirz Hashem. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.